They laughed when the orphan girl claimed the cursed land. They sneered when she refused to leave. But when ancient power erupted from beneath the earth and darkness swept across the frontier, those same voices fell silent, because the girl they dismissed had just become their only hope for survival. Welcome back to another epic tale. If you love stories of underdogs rising against impossible odds, you're in the right place. Stick around until the end to see how one forgotten soul becomes the savior of an entire kingdom. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Now, let's dive in. The rain fell in sheets the morning Leora Vance walked out of Greymarch Orphanage for the last time. She was 18 years old, and she owned nothing. No family name that mattered. No coins that jingled. No patron who'd claimed her during the quarterly choosing days when merchants and farmers came looking for free labor disguised as charity. Season after season, she'd stood in that line, thin, quiet, with mud-brown hair and eyes too sharp for comfort. And season after season, she'd been passed over. "Too clever by half," Matron Grell used to say, her voice dripping with disdain. "No one wants a girl who asks why when she should be saying yes." So Leora had stopped asking. She'd learned to move through Greymarch like smoke, present but unnoticed, there but not really seen. She cleaned the floors, mended the younger children's clothes, and kept her questions locked behind her teeth. And at night, when the dormitory fell silent except for the whispered prayers of girls who still believed someone might save them, Leora pulled out the only thing in this world that was truly hers: a map. It was old, crackling at the folds, drawn in faded ink on parchment that smelled like dust and years. She'd found it tucked inside the blanket she'd been wrapped in as an infant, the only clue to where she'd come from. Most of it was illegible now, worn away by her own fingers tracing the lines over and over. But three things remained clear: a location marked with an X far to the northwest, a name written in elegant script, Aldrich Vance, and a single word beneath it: inheritance. For 18 years, that word had been a whisper in her mind, a promise, a maybe. And now, standing at the orphanage gates with rain soaking through her threadbare coat, Leora decided that maybe was enough. "You'll die out there," Matron Grell called from the doorway, arms crossed over her broad chest. "A fool's errand, chasing ghosts and old stories. You should have taken the scullery position at the tavern when you had the chance." Leora didn't turn around. "I'd rather die chasing something than live scrubbing floors for people like you." She heard the sharp intake of breath behind her, the beginning of a self-righteous tirade. But she was already walking, one foot in front of the other, away from the only walls she'd ever known, away from the voices that had told her she was nothing. The frontier lay ahead, wild, dangerous, and utterly indifferent to whether she lived or died. Perfect. The journey took 3 weeks. Leora traveled on foot, following traders' roads when she could find them, and game trails when she couldn't. She slept in abandoned barns beneath bridge arches, once in a hollow tree during a storm that tried to shake the forest apart. She rationed the small pouch of dried bread and cheese she'd saved, making it last by hunting for wild mushrooms and edible roots the way old Tam, the groundskeeper, had taught her years ago. "Everything you need is out there," he'd told her once, his gnarled hands pointing at the forest beyond the orphanage fence. "You just gotta know how to look, how to listen." She listened now, to the rhythm of her own heartbeat, to the crunch of leaves underfoot, to the silence that wasn't really silence at all, but 1,000 small sounds woven together: wind through branches, water over stone, the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. The further northwest she traveled, the wilder the land became. Settlements grew sparse, then disappeared altogether. The roads turned to paths, the paths to deer tracks, and finally even those faded into nothing but raw wilderness. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks crowned with snow that never melted. Forests so dense the sunlight barely touched the ground. Rivers that roared with a voice that sounded almost alive. And people, what few she encountered, watched her with suspicion. "You're going where?" a trader asked when she stopped at a crossroads camp to refill her water skin. He was a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek and eyes that had seen too much. "Ain't nothing out that way but cursed ground and old ruins." "That's where I'm headed," Leora said simply. "Why?" "Because it's mine." He laughed, a sharp, humorless bark. "Yours? Girl, nobody owns that land. Aldrich Vance tried decades ago, built himself a compound, claimed he'd found something valuable. Then he vanished, his whole crew with him. Now folks say the land's got teeth, that it swallows anyone stupid enough to step foot on it. Leora met his gaze steadily. Good thing I'm not afraid of teeth. The trader shook his head, muttering something about foolish children and wasted youth. But he let her go. They always did. Because what did they care if one more orphan disappeared into the wilderness? Well, she reached the boundary on the 21st day. The map led her to a valley nestled between two mountain ridges, accessible only through a narrow pass choked with thorn bushes and fallen rock. The air tasted different here, sharp, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. And the silence was absolute. No birds sang. No insects hummed. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Leora stood at the edge of what should have been Aldrich Vance's land and felt her pulse quicken. Before her lay a sprawling expanse of untouched wilderness. Tall grasses swayed in patterns that didn't match any breeze. Trees grew in strange formations, their trunks twisted as if something beneath the soil had tried to shape them. And at the center of it all, barely visible through the vegetation, she could make out the crumbling stone foundations of what might have once been buildings. She stepped forward. The moment her boot touched the soil, something shifted. Not physically, nothing moved, but the air itself seemed to notice her, to acknowledge her presence. It was the strangest sensation, like being watched by something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. Leora's hand went instinctively to the knife at her belt. Hello? No answer, just that pressure in the air, that sense of attention focused on her. She forced herself to breathe evenly. My name is Leora Vance. I think I'm supposed to be here. Still nothing. But the pressure didn't increase, didn't feel hostile, just watchful. She took another step, then another. The tall grasses parted around her legs as if making way, and beneath her feet the ground felt strangely warm despite the chill mountain air. She walked toward the ruins, her eyes scanning for danger, her mind racing through everything Old Tam had taught her about reading landscapes. Never trust land that feels wrong, he'd said, but never ignore it either. Sometimes wrong is just different, and different can be exactly what you need. The ruins were more extensive than she'd thought. Stone walls, half collapsed but still standing. The remnants of a large central building with archways that framed empty sky. Smaller structures scattered around it like attendants around a throne. And everywhere, carved into lintels, etched into foundation stones, painted in faded pigments on interior walls, symbols she didn't recognize. Spirals, branching patterns, shapes that hurt to look at too long because they seemed to shift when she wasn't focusing directly on them. Leora ran her fingers over one particularly deep carving. The stone was warm beneath her touch. What were you doing here, Aldrich? As if in answer, the ground trembled. It was subtle, barely more than a shiver beneath her feet. But it was unmistakable. Leora froze, her heart hammering. The tremor came again, stronger this time, and with it came a sound, low, resonant, like a bass note played on an instrument too large to comprehend. Beneath, she thought suddenly. Something's beneath. She'd seen cave systems before, explored a few near Greymarch when she'd needed to escape Matron Grell's wrath. She knew the signs, subtle depressions in the ground, unusual vegetation patterns, the way sound carried differently over hollow earth. And this entire valley, she realized, was sitting on top of something massive. The tremor faded, the sound stopped, but now Leora couldn't not see it. The way the land dipped slightly toward the center, the way certain areas had no vegetation at all while others grew in wild profusion, the way the ruins themselves seemed positioned in a deliberate pattern, as if marking something. An entrance. There had to be an entrance. She spent the rest of that day searching, methodically examining every structure, every foundation, every anomaly in the landscape. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in shades of amber and crimson, she found it. A stone slab, half buried beneath decades of soil and dead leaves, tucked into the base of the largest ruin. It wouldn't have been visible at all, except for the way the setting sunlight hit it at just the right angle, revealing the seam where it met the surrounding rock. Leora dropped to her knees and began to dig. Her fingers tore through dirt and roots, her nails breaking, her palms scraped raw. She didn't care. Something in her chest was pulling taut, like a rope connecting her to whatever lay beneath this stone. Like recognition, like homecoming. When she finally cleared enough debris, she saw the symbols carved into the slab's surface, the same spirals and branching patterns from the ruins above, but arranged in a specific sequence. And at the center, a handprint. Without thinking, Leora pressed her palm against it. The stone moved. Not slowly, not with the grinding reluctance of ancient mechanisms. It simply was closed, and then it was open, as if reality itself had decided to skip the transition. A rectangular hole yawned before her, exhaling air that smelled like metal and ozone and something else, something alive. And from that darkness came light, faint, pulsing, the color of moonlight filtered through deep water. Blue-white. Cold fire. Leora stared into the opening, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." She had no rope, no torch, no plan for what she'd do if she got trapped down there. But she also had no food left, no shelter, and winter was coming to the mountains. She'd walked 3 weeks to reach this place based on nothing but a faded map and a name. Turning back now would be dying slowly instead of quickly. At least this way, she'd die knowing. Leora swung her legs over the edge and dropped into the dark. Bosot. The fall was shorter than she expected. She landed in a crouch on smooth stone, the impact jarring but not damaging. Above her, the entrance was a square of fading twilight. Below was impossible. The chamber was vast, larger than the entire orphanage, larger than any building she'd ever seen. And it glowed, not with torchlight or lantern flame, but with that same blue-white luminescence, emanating from veins of crystalline material that ran through the walls like frozen lightning. The veins pulsed gently, rhythmically, as if breathing. Leora stood slowly, her eyes adjusting, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. The walls were carved. Every surface, floor to ceiling, was covered in intricate patterns, some geometric, some organic, some that seemed to be both at once. And they weren't just decorative. As she watched, the light traveling through the crystal veins would pause at certain intersections, branching into new patterns, creating temporary constellations of brilliance before flowing onward. It was a system, a mechanism, something designed with purpose and precision beyond anything she'd imagined possible. "What is this place?" she breathed. Her voice echoed strangely, as if the chamber was analyzing the sound, breaking it into components, learning it. And then, impossibly, the light pulsed in response, a ripple of brilliance that cascaded through the nearest veins, bright enough to make her squint. Leora's heart was racing now, not with fear, or not only with fear, but with something else. Excitement, wonder. The same feeling she used to get when she'd discovered a hidden corner of Greymarch's library, a book no one else had touched in years, knowledge waiting just for her. She moved deeper into the chamber, following the largest concentration of light. The floor was perfectly smooth, almost warm beneath her worn boots. The air tasted clean despite the depth, circulating through passages she couldn't see. And everywhere, those patterns, those symbols. Some she recognized from the ruins above. Others were completely foreign. At the center of the chamber stood a structure unlike anything else. It was circular, perhaps 20 feet across, rising from the floor like a natural formation, except nothing about it was natural. The same crystalline material as the veins, but concentrated, compressed into a pillar that reached toward the ceiling and then branched, spreading outward in a canopy of light and stone. And within that canopy, suspended as if held by invisible threads, were dozens of smaller crystals, each one pulsing with its own rhythm, each one connected to the others by threads of light too thin to be seen directly, visible only when they moved like spider silk catching the sun. Leora approached it slowly, every instinct screaming both danger and destiny in equal measure. When she was close enough to touch it, the entire structure flared. Light blazed through the chamber, not blinding, but overwhelming, filling every corner, every crack, every space between the patterns on the walls. And in that moment of illumination, Leora felt something. Not physically, not emotionally, something deeper, older. A presence that had been waiting in the dark for so long it had almost forgotten what it was waiting for. And now it remembered. "You came," the presence seemed to say, though there were no words, no voice, just understanding, flowing into her mind like water finding a channel. After so long. You finally came. Leora's hands trembled. I don't understand. What are you? The light pulsed, and with it came knowing. Fragments of information, too fast to fully grasp, but enough to glimpse the edges of. This wasn't a place. This was a system, ancient beyond measure, created by people whose names had been lost to time, whose civilization had crumbled to dust while this mechanism endured beneath the earth. A system designed to draw energy from the living world, from the sun, the water, the very stone itself, and channel it, store it, shape it into something that could be used for healing, for protection, for power. And it had been dormant for decades, ever since Aldrich Vance had fled, terrified by what he'd discovered, unable to comprehend what he'd found. But Leora, the light focused on her now, and she felt it seeing her, reading her, not her past or her memories, but something fundamental, her essence, the core of who she was. Alone, it observed, forgotten, dismissed, overlooked. Yes, Leora whispered, but not small, not weak, just waiting. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. Yes. The light pulsed once, bright as a star, and Leora felt something shift inside her chest. A door opening, a lock turning, a connection forming between her and this ancient, patient power. Then wait no longer, it said. You are seen, you are chosen, you are home. And for the first time in 18 years of being passed over, pushed aside, and forgotten by every person who'd ever looked at her, Leora Vance felt like she belonged somewhere. She didn't leave the chamber that night. She couldn't. The moment the connection formed, she understood that touching the system had changed her. Not dramatically, she didn't suddenly sprout wings or shoot lightning from her fingertips, but fundamentally. Her senses had sharpened. She could feel the energy now, moving through the veins in the walls, pulsing beneath the floor. Could sense its rhythm, its flow, its vast and complex patterns. And more than that, she could feel it responding to her presence, to her intent. When she reached out tentatively with her mind, not knowing if it would work, half convinced she was losing her sanity, the light in the nearest crystal brightened. When she thought about warmth, the air around her grew warmer. When she wondered what lay in the passages leading away from the central chamber, the light traced paths through the darkness, illuminating doorways she hadn't noticed before. It was listening to her. She spent hours exploring, or what felt like hours. Time seemed strange down here, elastic and uncertain. The passages led to other chambers, some small and simple, others vast and complex. Each one served a purpose in the system. Storage nodes, distribution channels, focusing arrays. She didn't have names for most of what she saw, but she understood their function the way you understand how to breathe or how to walk. Instinctively, inherently. This system, she realized, was designed to be partnered with, to bond with a living consciousness that could direct its power, shape its energy, make decisions the mechanism itself couldn't make. It had been waiting for someone, for her. When exhaustion finally overwhelmed her excitement, Leora curled up in one of the smaller chambers, using her coat as a blanket. The light dimmed around her as if the system understood she needed rest. And as she drifted towards sleep, she felt something she'd never felt before. Safe. Not because the world had become less dangerous. Not because anyone was protecting her, but because here, in this place, she wasn't fighting to prove she deserved to exist. She just was. And that was enough. She woke to the sound of horses. Leora's eyes snapped open, her hand going to her knife even before she was fully conscious. The light in the chamber had shifted, brighter now, almost urgent, and through the connection she shared with the system, she could feel intrusion, movement above, footsteps on her land. Multiple people, armed. She scrambled to her feet and ran back through the passages, her boots echoing on stone. When she reached the central chamber, she looked up through the entrance hole and saw shapes moving across the opening, blocking the twilight. Telling you, something activated, a man's voice said, rough and authoritative. The scouts felt it 3 days ago. Power signatures from this valley, after 40 years of nothing. Could be a natural fluctuation, another voice responded, younger, uncertain. Natural. The first voice laughed coldly. Nothing about this place is natural. Vance found something here, something valuable, and he was too weak to claim it. We won't make the same mistake. Leora's blood ran cold. They were here for the system, for her system. She glanced around the chamber, her mind racing. There was no other exit, at least none she'd found yet, which meant if they came down here, she was trapped. One girl with a knife against how many? From the voices and footsteps, at least a dozen, maybe more. The system pulsed around her, and she felt it offering something: power, defense, protection. I could stop them, she thought. Couldn't I? But she didn't know how. Didn't understand the system well enough yet to wield it as a weapon. And some deep instinct warned her that revealing its existence, revealing her connection to it, would make her a target for every power-hungry warlord and kingdom in the region. So instead, she pressed herself against the wall near the entrance, knife in hand, and waited. The first man dropped through the opening with military precision, armored, armed with a sword, eyes scanning the chamber immediately. He was followed by another, then another. 6 men, all equipped for combat, all moving with the practiced coordination of soldiers. And then a 7th figure descended, different from the others. He was taller, broader through the shoulders, and his armor was finer, dark metal chased with silver, a cloak the color of storm clouds. His face was hard-angled and weathered, with a scar running from his left temple to his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught Leora's attention. Gray, like winter sky, and sharp enough to cut. Those eyes swept the chamber and found her immediately. Leora tensed, ready to run or fight or die trying, but the man held up one hand, stopping his soldiers before they could advance. "Lower your weapons," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "She's alone." "Sir, she could be—" "Lower your weapons." The soldiers obeyed instantly. The man took 2 steps toward Leora, then stopped, maintaining distance, showing he wasn't an immediate threat. "My name is Ravine," he said. "I'm the warden of the eastern frontier, and you are trespassing on unclaimed territory." Leora's jaw clenched. "This land belonged to Aldrich Vance. I'm his heir, which means you're the one trespassing." Something flickered in Kael's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. "His heir? Do you have proof?" She pulled the map from her coat with her free hand, unfolding it enough to show the name. "This is all I have. It's all I've ever had." Kael studied the map, then her face, then the chamber around them. When his gaze returned to her, it was different, calculating. "You activated this place." It wasn't a question, but Leora answered anyway. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie." His voice wasn't angry, just certain. 3 days ago, every sensitive instrument in my keep registered a power surge from this valley. The kind of signature that only comes from ancient systems waking up. And here you are, standing in the middle of what looks like the most sophisticated energy matrix I've ever seen, pretending you just stumbled in by accident. Leora's grip tightened on her knife. "What do you want?" "The truth." Kael took another step closer, and Leora realized he was unarmed, his sword still sheathed, his hands open. "What is this place? What did you find?" She could lie, should lie, but something about the way he looked at her, direct, unflinching, without the dismissiveness she'd seen in every other adult's eyes, made her hesitate. "I don't know what it is," she said finally. "Not completely, but it's alive, conscious, and it's been waiting." "For you?" "Apparently." Kael was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he turned to his soldiers. "Outside, all of you, now. Lord Draven, we can't—" "That wasn't a request, Captain. Outside. Seal the entrance. Don't let anyone else in until I call for you." The soldiers looked deeply unhappy about it, but they obeyed, ascending back through the entrance one by one until only Kael and Leora remained. The silence stretched between them, heavy with tension and possibility. "Why send them away?" Leora asked finally. Kael's expression was unreadable. "Because if what I think is actually happening, then keeping it secret is the only way to keep you alive. And if I'm wrong," he shrugged, "then I just wanted to talk to you without an audience." "Talk about what?" "About the fact that 2 weeks ago I had a vision." Leora blinked. "A vision." "I don't have them often," Kael said, and there was something in his voice, a raw honesty, that surprised her. "Maybe 3 times in my life. But when I do, They're never wrong. And this one showed me a valley. This valley. And a power source beneath it that could change everything. The system pulsed around them, and Leora wondered if it was responding to Kael, if it recognized him somehow. Change everything how? She asked carefully. Kael's face was grim. There's a force rising in the eastern mountains, something old and angry and destructive. My scouts have been tracking it for months. Every settlement it passes through burns. Every army that tries to stop it gets destroyed. And it's heading west, toward the populated kingdoms, toward my territory. He met her eyes directly. I came here looking for a weapon, something powerful enough to stop what's coming. But instead, I found you. Leora's heart was hammering. I'm not a weapon. No, Kael agreed quietly. You're something more dangerous. You're the person a weapon has chosen to bond with. The truth of it hung in the air between them. Undeniable, terrifying. And in that moment, Leora understood that her life had just become infinitely more complicated, because the girl no one had chosen was now bonded to a power that could save or destroy kingdoms, and everyone was about to find out. The silence between them stretched taut as a bowstring. Leora's mind raced, weighing options, calculating risks. Kael Draven stood before her, a frontier warden, which meant power, resources, soldiers, a man who'd come looking for a weapon and found her instead. She could feel the system pulsing around them, its energy thrumming through the walls, waiting for her direction like a hound waiting for its master's command. She could kill him, right now. The thought came unbidden but clear. One thought, one intention, and the system would respond. She didn't know exactly how, crushing force, burning light, something else entirely, but she knew it would answer her, knew it would protect her if she asked. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he'd sent his soldiers away. Maybe it was the honesty in his voice when he'd spoken about his visions. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she was just tired of being alone. If this force is as dangerous as you say, Leora said carefully, why are you down here talking to me instead of preparing your defenses? Kael's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those winter-gray eyes. Because conventional defenses won't stop what's coming. I've tried. Lost 3 battalions already. Whatever this thing is, it burns through steel and stone like they're paper. He paused. I need something it doesn't expect. Something it can't counter. And you think I'm it. I think you're connected to something that might give us a chance. He gestured at the chamber around them. This place, I've studied ancient systems most of my life. Collected fragments, deciphered texts, tried to understand the civilization that built them. But I've never seen anything like this. Never seen one still functional. Leora felt the system respond to his words, a subtle shift in the light, almost like curiosity. You study ancient systems? When I'm not fighting wars or managing impossible borders, yes. A ghost of something that might have been a smile crossed his face. My advisors think it's a waste of time. My captains think it's eccentric. But you can't defend a frontier without understanding the land you're defending. And this land... He touched the wall, his fingers tracing the glowing veins. This land is older than any kingdom. Older than most recorded history. Despite herself, Leora felt a spark of recognition. Someone else who asked questions when they should have been saying yes. Someone else who looked at the world and wanted to understand it, not just survive it. The vision you had, she said. What exactly did it show you? Kael's face went hard. Fire. So much fire the sky turned black. And beneath it, a creature, if you can call it that, made of living flame and ancient rage. It swept across my territory like a plague, burning everything. Towns, forests, people. His jaw clenched. But then the vision shifted. Showed me this valley, and a light rising from beneath the earth, strong enough to hold the darkness back. A light, Leora repeated softly. Blue-white, cold fire. His eyes locked on hers. The same light that's all around us right now. The system pulsed, and Leora felt it pushing information into her mind. Faster now, more insistent. Images, concepts. A growing urgency she couldn't quite name. It's trying to tell me something, she whispered. About what's coming. Kael went very still. Can you understand it? Not words, just feelings. Warnings. She closed her eyes, focusing on the connection, letting it flow through her. It knows the force you're talking about, recognizes it. She struggled for the right term. They're opposite somehow. This system channels life energy, draws from the living world. But that creature you saw, it's different. It consumes, destroys, turns everything to ash, and the image hit her like a physical blow. She staggered, and Kael's hand shot out, steadying her. What did you see? Lior's voice came out shaky. The Eastern Mountains. Something buried there, dormant for centuries. But someone woke it up. Recently, deliberately. Who? I don't know. The system doesn't have that kind of memory, but it's afraid. She opened her eyes, meeting Kael's shocked gaze. This ancient, powerful thing that's been sleeping under the earth for who knows how long, it's afraid of what's coming. Kael's face had gone pale. Then we're all in more trouble than I thought. A sound echoed from above, footsteps, urgent and multiple. One of Kael's soldiers appeared at the entrance, his expression tight with barely controlled panic. Lord Ravine! Riders approaching from the south, 50 at least, bearing Lord Corvin's banner. Kael swore viciously. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. Seal this entrance. I want it to look like undisturbed earth. Move. The soldier disappeared. Kael turned back to Liora, and the urgency in his voice was unmistakable. Listen to me very carefully. Lord Corvin is a territorial governor from the southern provinces. He's ambitious, ruthless, and he has 3 times the military force I do. If he discovers what you've found here, he'll try to take it, Liora finished. He'll try to take you. Kael's hands gripped her shoulders, forcing her to focus. You're the key to this power, which means you're the most valuable asset in the frontier right now. And men like Corvin don't negotiate for assets. They conquer them. Liora felt ice spreading through her chest. What do I do? Can you hide this place? Make it look dormant again? She closed her eyes, reaching for the system, asking it to dim, to quiet, to hide. The light responded immediately, fading to barely a whisper, the pulsing rhythm slowing to something that could have been mistaken for residual energy. Dying echoes of whatever Aldrich Vance had activated decades ago. It's done, she said. Kael nodded sharply. Good. Stay down here. Don't come up no matter what you hear. If Corvin suspects anything, he won't get me without a fight. Something fierce and approving flashed in Kael's eyes. I believe that. But don't fight unless there's no other choice. Stay hidden. Stay alive. I'll handle Corvin. He was moving toward the entrance when Liora's voice stopped him. Why are you protecting me? Kael turned back, and for a moment his expression was completely unguarded. Because the frontier is full of people who'll use power to destroy, and you're the first person I've met in years who might use it to build something instead. Then he was gone, hauling himself up through the entrance with practiced efficiency. Liora heard the sound of earth being moved, heavy objects being positioned, making it look like nothing had been disturbed. She stood alone in the dim chamber, her heart racing, and wondered if she'd just made the smartest decision of her life or the most foolish. The system hummed around her, patient and watchful, waiting to see what happened next. Above she heard horses, voices raised in greeting that didn't sound friendly, and Kael's voice, calm and controlled, welcoming an enemy onto her land. Liora pressed herself against the wall and listened. Draven, a new voice said, cultured, smooth, with an edge like polished steel. What brings the Eastern Warden so far from his watchtowers? I could ask you the same, Corvin. This is unclaimed territory. Unclaimed, and yet here you stand with a full squad. Curious. Routine patrol. The eastern threat is moving west. I'm securing potential defensive positions. A pause. Then Corvin's voice again, sharper now. Don't insult my intelligence. 3 days ago, every sensitivity instrument in 5 provinces registered a massive energy signature from this valley, the kind that only comes from ancient systems activating. And now I find you here, standing on ruins that haven't been touched in 40 years. If you already knew about the energy signature, why ask? Because I want to hear you lie about it. Gives me a better sense of how desperate you are. Liora could hear the tension crackling between them, even through layers of stone and earth. Her hand went to her knife, though what good it would do against 50 armed soldiers, she had no idea. There's nothing here, Kael said flatly. Whatever activated 3 days ago has gone dormant again. Probably just a fluctuation in residual power. These old systems do that sometimes. Show me. I don't take orders from you, Corvin. No, but you do take orders from the Crown, and I carry a royal writ authorizing me to investigate and secure any discovered ancient technology in the Western Territories. Corvin's voice was smug now. So unless you want to be charged with obstruction of Crown business, I suggest you show me what you've found. Silence. Leora could imagine Kael's face, that controlled mask, those calculating eyes, weighing options, looking for angles. There's a chamber, he said finally, below, but it's dormant, empty. Whatever power was here is long gone. Then you won't mind if I see for myself. Footsteps. Many of them. Leora's pulse hammered in her throat as she heard earth being moved, the sound of the entrance being uncovered. She backed deeper into the chamber, toward one of the passages leading away from the central space. The system whispered around her, offering concealment, offering defense, offering a dozen options she didn't have time to evaluate. She chose the simplest one, shadow and silence. The light dimmed even further at her unspoken request, plunging the chamber into near total darkness. Only the faintest glow remained in the veins, barely enough to see by. And Leora pressed herself into a narrow passage entrance, breathing as quietly as possible, becoming just another shadow among many. The first figure dropped through the entrance, not Kael, but one of Corvin's soldiers. Then another, then Kael himself, his face carefully neutral. And finally, Lord Corvin. He was younger than Leora expected, maybe 30, with aristocratic features and eyes that missed nothing. He wore armor that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, and he moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Well," he said, his voice echoing in the dim chamber. "This is unexpected." His soldiers spread out, examining the walls, the patterns, the nearly invisible glow still pulsing through the crystal veins. One of them produced a device, some kind of instrument with dials and needles, and held it up, watching the readings. "Energy signature is minimal," the soldier reported. "Consistent with long-term decay. Whatever this system was, it's been dead for years." Corvin's eyes narrowed. He walked to the center of the chamber, to the crystalline structure that had blazed so brilliantly when Leora first touched it. Now it sat dark and quiet, looking like nothing more than an interesting geological formation. He reached out and pressed his palm against it. Nothing happened. Leora watched from her hiding place, barely breathing. The system was still there, still conscious, still aware, but it had withdrawn completely, hiding its true nature behind a facade of dead stone, protecting itself, protecting her. Corvin pulled his hand back, frustration flickering across his perfect features. "Run a full-spectrum analysis. I want to know what this place was designed for. Sir, with respect, that could take days. Then you'll work through the night." Corvin turned to Kael. "You're certain this is everything? Search for yourself if you don't believe me." Corvin's smile was cold. "Oh, I intend to. This valley, these ruins, they're under Crown investigation now, which means you and your men will leave. This is frontier territory, under my jurisdiction. Was under your jurisdiction. The moment I produce this writ, it becomes Crown property. So unless you want to challenge royal authority..." Corvin let the threat hang in the air. Kael's jaw was tight enough to crack stone, but he nodded once. "My men and I will withdraw to the perimeter." "You'll withdraw to your keep, which is 2 days' ride from here." "That's not..." "Those are your orders, Warden. Or should I add insubordination to obstruction?" The silence stretched. Leora could see the war happening behind Kael's eyes. Duty versus instinct, protocol versus protection. If he refused, he'd be stripped of his position, possibly arrested, and then there'd be no one to stand between Corvin and her. But if he left... "Fine," Kael said, each word bitten off. "We'll withdraw." He turned toward the entrance, his soldiers following, and Leora felt panic rising in her chest. He couldn't leave her here. Not with Corvin and his people crawling through the chamber, searching for... Kael paused at the base of the entrance, turning back as if remembering something trivial. "One thing, Corvin. This system, if it was active, would have required a catalyst, a person with the right compatibility. Just finding it wouldn't have been enough. Corvin's eyes sharpened. Your point? Just that if you're looking for power, you're looking in the wrong place. The real prize wouldn't be the system itself. It would be whoever could activate it. And if such a person existed, where would I find them? Kyle shrugged. If I knew that, I'd have them already. He hauled himself up through the entrance, and his soldiers followed. Leora watched them go, understanding flickering through her shock. Kale had just told Corvin exactly what to look for, but he'd also planted the idea that such a person was somewhere else, somewhere Corvin would have to search for, buying her time. Corvin stood in the center of the chamber, his fingers drumming against his sword hilt, thinking. Then he turned to his soldiers. Seal this entrance. I want guards posted in shifts, 12 on, 12 off. No one enters or leaves without my authorization. And send word to the capital. I want specialists. Artificers, historians, anyone who understands ancient systems. What about Draven's suggestion, my lord? About a catalyst? Corvin's smile was predatory. Oh, we'll search for that too. Every settlement within a week's ride, every traveler who passed through here in the last month, someone activated this system, which means someone knows how to use it. His eyes glittered. And when we find them, they'll belong to the crown. He gestured toward the entrance. Let's go. We have work to do. They ascended one by one, Corvin last, his eyes sweeping the chamber one final time before he disappeared through the opening. Leora heard earth being moved again, heavier this time. Stones, lumber, they were sealing it completely. And then silence. Leora waited 5 full minutes before allowing herself to breathe normally. The system flickered around her, still dim but returning slowly to awareness. She could feel its concern through the connection, not for itself, but for her. Trapped now, hunted. She emerged from the passage, looking up at the sealed entrance. Stone and timber where an opening had been. No way out. Well, she whispered to the empty chamber, that could have gone better. The system pulsed in what felt absurdly like agreement. She spent the next several hours exploring every passage, every chamber, searching for another way out. The system helped, lighting paths she hadn't noticed before, opening sealed doorways, revealing the full extent of the complex beneath Aldrich Vance's ruins. It was vast, easily 10 times larger than what she'd seen initially. Chambers dedicated to storage, to processing, to distribution. Nodes where energy was gathered and refined. Channels where it could be directed outward, toward specific purposes. And deep beneath it all, in a chamber that made her bones ache with its power, the source. A reservoir of pure energy drawn from the living world over centuries, concentrated and stored. Enough power to level mountains or heal thousands. Enough to destroy an army or protect a kingdom. And it was all connected to her now, responsive to her will, shaped by her intentions. The responsibility of it made her dizzy. She found an exit eventually. A narrow shaft leading up through the mountain, emerging in a cave system half a mile from the main ruins. Cleverly hidden, probably designed as an escape route. But it was too narrow for Corvin's soldiers to use easily, and she could feel the system offering to collapse it behind her if she chose to flee. Leora stood at the base of that shaft, staring up at the circle of gray sky visible far above, and weighed her options. She could run, take the power inside her, because she understood now that the connection meant she carried a piece of it wherever she went, and disappear into the frontier. Find some distant corner of the wilderness where no one would look for her. Live quietly, alone. Safe. Or she could stay. Face whatever was coming. Trust that Kyle would find a way to help her. Use this power for something more than survival. The orphan in her, the girl who'd learned to make herself invisible, screamed at her to run. But the woman she was becoming, the one who'd walked 3 weeks into the wilderness chasing a maybe, who'd dropped into an ancient chamber on nothing but hope, who'd bonded with a power that chose her when no one else ever had. That woman wanted to fight. I'm tired of hiding, she said to the empty cavern. Tired of being dismissed and overlooked and passed over like I don't matter. The system pulsed, and she felt its agreement, its understanding. Corvin wants to own this power. Use it for the crown. Turn it into a weapon. Another pulse. Denial this time. Refusal. And I think Kyle wants to protect it, but he can't do that if I'm not here. The system showed her something then. An image, a possibility. Kale's vision made manifest, the creature of fire sweeping across the frontier, burning, destroying, and beneath it, here, power rising to meet it, not to destroy, but to defend, to shield, to save. "You think I can do that?" Leora whispered. "Stop what's coming." Certainty flooded through the connection. Not arrogance, not assumption, just simple, absolute conviction that she was capable of exactly what was needed. No one had ever believed in her like that before. "All right," she said, "then I need to learn everything. Teach me how this works. Teach me how to use you. Because if Corvin finds me, I won't go quietly." The system bloomed. Light erupted through every chamber, every passage, every vein in the stone. Not the soft glow she'd seen before, but brilliant, overwhelming radiance. And with it came knowledge, flooding into her mind faster than thought. The architecture of the system, the flow of energy through its channels, the way to draw power, shape it, direct it outward, combat applications, defensive configurations, healing protocols, construction sequences, centuries of accumulated wisdom, compressed into pure understanding and poured directly into her consciousness. Leora staggered under the weight of it, her vision blurring, her knees buckling. Too much. Too fast. Her human mind wasn't designed to process information at this speed, but the system adjusted, slowed, organized the knowledge into layers, presenting it piece by piece, letting her integrate each concept before moving to the next, learning her limits, adapting to her capacity, teaching her the way a master teaches an apprentice, with patience, with care. She didn't know how long it lasted. Hours, maybe? Or days. Time felt strange when you were having fundamental truths about reality carved directly into your understanding. But when it finally ended, when the light dimmed back to its usual glow and Leora found herself sitting on the chamber floor with her back against the wall, she was different. Not physically. She still looked like the same thin, mud-haired girl who'd walked out of Greymarch orphanage with nothing but a map and hope. But inside, she was someone else entirely. Someone who understood power, who could wield it, who knew exactly how dangerous she'd become. She pushed herself to her feet, her legs shaking but steady, and looked up at the sealed entrance far above. "Let them come," she said quietly. "Corvin, his soldiers, his specialists. Let them search the frontier for the person who activated this system." The light pulsed in anticipation. "Because when they find me, I'll show them exactly why this power chose someone they overlooked." She walked back through the passages toward the central chamber, her mind already working through strategies. Corvin wouldn't leave the valley unguarded. He'd have soldiers above, watching, waiting, which meant she couldn't just walk out, couldn't simply flee. She needed to be smart, careful, patient. The system showed her surveillance configurations, ways to extend her awareness through the earth, to sense movement on the surface. She activated them carefully, feeling her consciousness spread upward through stone and soil until she could perceive the valley above as clearly as if she was standing in it. 12 guards, posted around the ruins, alert, armed, and in the largest tent, Corvin himself, studying what looked like maps and documents, planning his search. Leora smiled grimly. Let him plan. Let him send his soldiers to every settlement and crossroad. While he was looking for her out there, she'd be right here, learning everything the system could teach her. And when the moment came, when the eastern threat arrived, when fire swept across the frontier, she'd be ready. Because the girl no one chose had been chosen by something far more powerful than any crown, and she intended to prove it. 3 days passed in focused intensity. Leora barely slept, sustained by the system's energy more than by food or rest. She practiced drawing power, shaping it, directing it with increasing precision. Started small, lighting individual crystals, adjusting temperature in specific chambers, then progressed to larger manipulations, creating barriers of hardened air, generating pulses of force that could shatter stone, learning to channel energy through her own body, amplifying her strength, her speed, her endurance. The system was an extraordinary teacher, showing her not just how to use power, but how to use it efficiently, how to minimize waste, how to draw from the reservoir without depleting it, how to work with the energy's natural flow rather than forcing it to her will. And always, underneath the technical knowledge, she felt that same patient conviction, that certainty that she was meant for this, that she was right. On the fourth morning, she sensed movement above. Not the regular patrols, something different, horses, wagons, voices she didn't recognize. The specialists had arrived. Leora extended her awareness, watching as Corvin greeted them. 3 figures, 2 men and a woman, all wearing the formal robes of royal artificers. They carried instruments, books, tools designed for analyzing ancient systems. Corvin was explaining the situation, gesturing at the ruins, at the sealed entrance. Want a complete assessment, he was saying. Functionality, capacity, original purpose. And most importantly, how to access its power without a catalyst. That's not how these systems work, Lord Corvin, the woman said, her voice patient but firm. They're designed to bond with compatible individuals. Trying to access them without that bond is like trying to see without eyes. The mechanism might technically function, but I'm not paying you for philosophy. I'm paying you for solutions. The woman's expression went tight, but she nodded. We'll do what we can. They began work immediately, setting up equipment around the entrance, taking measurements, recording data. Leora watched them through her earth sense, fascinated despite the danger. These were people who understood ancient technology, who'd studied the same civilization that built the system she was bonded to. Part of her wanted to reveal herself, to learn from them, to ask the 1,000 questions burning in her mind. But the larger part, the part that was learning to think strategically, knew that would be suicide. Corvin would claim her the moment she surfaced, and these specialists, for all their knowledge, served the crown. Not her. So she watched, and learned what she could from their methods, and waited. 2 days later, Kael returned. Leora felt him the moment he entered the valley. A ripple of disturbance in the surveillance field, different from the soldiers or specialists. Sharper. More focused. The system recognized him somehow, flagged his presence as significant. She watched through her awareness as he approached Corvin's camp, alone, his expression carefully neutral. Draven, Corvin said, surprised. I thought I made it clear you were to remain at your keep. You did. I'm choosing to ignore you. That's insubordination. Arrest me then. Kael's voice was flat. But not before I tell you what my scouts just reported from the eastern mountains. Corvin's expression shifted from irritation to interest. Go on. The threat is moving, faster than we anticipated. It hit the settlement of Greystone 3 days ago, population of 2,000. There are no survivors. Silence. Even through the earth, Leora could feel the shock radiating from the gathered soldiers. 2,000, one of the specialists breathed, burned completely. Buildings, people, even the ground itself is scorched down to bedrock. Nothing living within a mile of the town center. Kael pulled a rolled map from his coat, spreading it on a nearby table. At its current pace, it'll reach the populated provinces in less than 2 weeks, and your territory, Corvin, is directly in its path. Corvin's face had gone pale. Can it be stopped? Not with conventional forces. I've tried. Lost another battalion yesterday when they attempted to establish a defensive line. Kael's finger traced a path on the map. This thing doesn't fight like an army. It just is. A wall of living fire that consumes everything in its path. Arrows burn before they reach it. Siege weapons melt. And anyone who gets close enough to engage directly burns, Corvin finished quietly. Instantly. The specialists exchanged glances. The woman spoke up. If this is an ancient power like the system here, it might respond to similar energy. A counterforce. Something designed to oppose it. That's what I'm counting on, Kael said, his eyes meeting Corvin's. Which is why I'm here. Have you made any progress with the chamber? Corvin's expression turned sour. It's dormant, completely inert. Without a catalyst to activate it, then find one. We're trying, but do you have any idea how rare compatibility is? 1 person in 10,000, maybe. And that's assuming they're even still alive. For all we know, whoever activated this system 3 days ago is dead, or fled to the coast, or... They're close, Kael interrupted. I'd stake my position on it. Based on what? Another vision? Based on the fact that an untrained, unknown catalyst somehow activated one of the most sophisticated ancient systems ever discovered and then vanished without a trace. That suggests intelligence, planning, self-preservation. Kael leaned forward. And it suggests they're still interested in what this system can do. Leora felt her pulse quicken. He knew, or suspected. Either way, he was trying to draw her out. Corvin was quiet for a long moment, studying the map, the ruins, Kyle's face. What are you proposing? Let me search the immediate area. 5-mile radius. I'll be thorough, discreet, and if I find anyone who might be compatible, I'll bring them straight to you. Why should I trust you with this? Because you don't have time not to. That fire creature will be here in 2 weeks, and right now this dormant system is your only chance of stopping it. Kael straightened. Let me do my job, Corvin. Let me protect the frontier, and when I find your catalyst, you'll have your weapon. The silence stretched. Then Corvin nodded sharply. Fine. 5 days. If you haven't found anyone by then, you withdraw and I bring in my own searchers. Agreed. Kael left the camp immediately, heading not toward the frontier but deeper into the valley, toward the cave system where Leora's escape route emerged. She understood his plan instantly. He was giving her a chance to reveal herself, away from Corvin's eyes, away from the specialists and soldiers. But it was also a test, to see if she'd trust him. Leora made her decision in seconds. She moved through the passages quickly, navigating by instinct now as much as conscious thought, and emerged from the narrow cave opening just as Kael reached it. He went very still when he saw her, his hand dropping away from his sword. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. You stayed, he said finally. You came back. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. I wasn't sure you would trust me. I'm not sure I do. Leora stepped fully out of the cave into the gray daylight. But I trust that you're not like Corvin, that you see this system as more than just a weapon. And what do you see it as? She considered the question carefully. A responsibility. A choice. Power that could save people or destroy them, depending on who wields it. Kael nodded slowly. Then we're on the same side. Are we? Because from what I just heard, you're planning to hand me over to Corvin. I'm planning to buy us time. He moved closer, his voice urgent. Listen, that creature I described, it's real. It's coming. And without this system, without you, thousands of people will die. But Corvin can't know you're here. Not yet. Because the moment he does, he'll try to control you, use you like a tool. And that's not how this works. So what's your plan? You train. Learn everything this system can teach you, and I'll manage Corvin. Keep him focused on the wrong areas. When the threat arrives, when there's no other choice, then you reveal yourself, not as his weapon, as the frontier's defender. Leora searched his face, looking for deception, found only grim determination. And if he tries to take me anyway? Then I'll stop him. Kael's hand went to his sword hilt, not threatening, just definitive. I've spent 10 years defending this frontier from external threats. If I have to defend it from internal ones too, so be it. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke from Corvin's camp. Leora thought about Greystone. 2,000 people. Gone. And more settlements in the path of whatever was coming. She thought about the system beneath her feet, vast and patient and powerful, waiting for her to decide what to do with it. And she thought about who she'd been, the forgotten girl, the passed-over orphan, and who she was becoming. All right, she said, we do it your way. I stay hidden, I train, and when the moment comes, I'll be ready. Kael's expression shifted, relief and respect, and something else she couldn't quite name. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this goes wrong, we're both dead. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't go wrong. He moved to leave, then paused, turning back. One more thing. The system chose you for a reason. Trust that. Trust yourself. Because when the time comes, you're going to have to make decisions no one else can make. And there won't be anyone to tell you if you're right. Then he was gone, moving back toward Corvin's camp, leaving Leora alone at the cave entrance. She stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of what she'd agreed to, the risk, the responsibility. Then she turned and descended back into the earth, back to the light and power waiting below, and began to prepare for war. The training consumed her. Leora pushed herself beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, beyond the limits she'd thought her body possessed. Each day she descended deeper into the system's knowledge, learning not just to channel power, but to become one with it, The connection between her mind and the ancient mechanism grew stronger, more instinctive, until she could sense every pulse of energy flowing through the earth, every node gathering strength, every channel ready to release it at her command. She learned to create barriers of compressed air that could stop a charging horse dead, to generate waves of force that shattered practice targets of stone, to channel healing energy through living tissue. She'd cut her palm deliberately, then watched in amazement as the wound closed under her directed will, skin knitting together as if time itself reversed. But the combat applications terrified her most, because they worked devastatingly well. On the 6th day, she stood in the central chamber and raised both hands. The system responded instantly, drawing power from the reservoir deep below, channeling it through her body until her skin glowed with blue-white light. She pushed outward with her mind, and a sphere of pure energy exploded from her palms, slamming into the far wall with enough force to crack stone 3 feet thick. The recoil threw her backward. She hit the ground hard, gasping, her entire body trembling from the surge. "Too much," she panted. "Need to control the flow better." The system pulsed agreement and showed her how, visualizing the power as water through a narrowing channel, controlling volume and pressure with precise intention rather than raw emotion. She tried again, and again, and again, until she could generate the same destructive force without the backlash, channeling it so smoothly it felt like breathing. Above ground, Kale played his part perfectly. She monitored him through her earth sense, watching as he searched settlements, questioned travelers, maintained the fiction that he was hunting for Corvin's mysterious catalyst. He was buying her time, she knew. Days that she used to transform herself from a frightened orphan into something else entirely. Something dangerous. On the 8th day, everything changed. Leora was practicing defensive configurations when she felt it, a tremor in the earth that had nothing to do with the system. Deep, resonant, wrong. The surveillance field she'd spread across the valley suddenly blazed with warning, and through it she sensed something approaching from the east. Not soldiers, not people. Heat. Massive, overwhelming heat that scorched the ground it passed over. And beneath that heat, something alive, conscious, hungry. The creature from Kael's vision had arrived early. Leora raced through the passages to her cave exit, emerging into afternoon light that had turned strange and orange. The sky to the east glowed like sunset, but it was the wrong direction, the wrong color. Smoke rose in thick columns, and the air tasted like burning metal. She extended her awareness as far as it would reach, and nearly collapsed from what she sensed. A wall of fire 300 feet high, moving across the frontier like a living avalanche. Everything it touched ignited, trees, grass, stone itself. And at its center, barely visible through the flames, a shape. Humanoid but massive, made of molten rock and ancient rage, its eyes burning with intelligence that predated human civilization by millennia. It was heading directly for Corvin's camp. Leora's blood turned to ice. There were maybe 60 people there, soldiers, specialists, support staff, and they had no idea what was coming. No time to evacuate. No defenses that could possibly hold. She could run, right now. Use the cave system to escape deeper into the mountains, flee while the creature was occupied with easier prey. The survivor in her, the girl who'd learned to make herself invisible, screamed at her to do exactly that. But then she thought about Kael, about the specialists who were just doing their jobs, about the soldiers who were following orders. 60 people who would burn alive in the next 10 minutes if she did nothing. "No," she whispered. "Not like this." She ran, not away from the danger, but toward it, sprinting across the valley floor with speed amplified by the system's energy flowing through her legs. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she pushed harder, drawing more power, becoming faster than any human should be able to move. She burst into Corvin's camp just as the first screams began. Everyone was staring east, frozen in horror, as the wall of fire crested the ridge and began its descent into the valley. The heat was already overwhelming even at this distance, making the air shimmer, igniting dry grass in its path. "Run!" someone was shouting. "Fall back! Fall back!" But there was nowhere to run. The creature was too fast, too vast. They'd never make it. Kael saw her first. His eyes went wide, then immediately understanding. He started toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "Get everyone behind me!" she shouted over the roar of approaching flames. "Now!" Corvin spun toward her voice, his face a mask of shock. Who? Your catalyst! Lior's voice cracked like thunder. I'm your catalyst. Now get your people behind me or watch them burn. For one frozen second, Corvin just stared. Then his training kicked in. You heard her. Form up. Defensive formation behind that position. The soldiers moved instantly, decades of discipline overriding panic. They grabbed the specialists, the support staff, anyone who couldn't move fast enough on their own, and pulled them into a tight cluster behind where Liora stood. She could feel their terror, their doubt. This thin girl with mud-brown hair and worn clothes, claiming she could stop a force that had destroyed battalions. The creature was 100 yards away now, close enough that Liora could see the cracks in its molten skin, the way magma dripped from its massive hands, the absolute emptiness in its burning eyes. Close enough that she could feel the system's response, not fear, but recognition. These two powers knew each other, had faced each other before, in ages so distant even the stones had forgotten. Liora planted her feet and reached deep. The system answered like a war drum. Power erupted through her body. Not the controlled flow she'd been practicing, but a torrent, a flood, everything the reservoir could channel simultaneously. Her skin blazed with blue-white light so intense it hurt to look at. The ground beneath her feet cracked as energy poured into it, spreading outward in branching patterns that mirrored the crystalline veins far below. And then she raised both hands and pushed. The barrier materialized instantly, a wall of compressed energy 50 feet high and 200 feet wide, positioned between the soldiers and the oncoming inferno. It was transparent but visible. The air itself crystallized into a shield that hummed with power. The fire creature hit it at full force. The impact was apocalyptic. Flame and energy collided with a sound like the world splitting, a concussive blast that knocked everyone behind Liora flat. The barrier held, but just barely. She could feel the strain, the creature's heat trying to find weaknesses, to burn through, to consume. Hold, she gritted through clenched teeth. Hold. She gritted through trying to overwhelm her, to break her will, to prove she was nothing compared to its ancient fury. But Liora Vance had spent 18 years being told she was nothing, being overlooked, dismissed, passed over. And she was done accepting that. She pulled more power from the system, channeling it through every cell of her body, reinforcing the barrier even as the creature pressed harder. The light around her intensified until she was a blazing star in human form, and behind her, she heard gasps of awe and terror. The creature pulled back slightly, reassessing. Then it raised one massive arm and brought it down like a hammer. The barrier cracked. Not much, just a hairline fracture, but it was enough. Liora felt it like a knife in her chest, felt the system screaming warnings, felt her own strength beginning to fail under the impossible strain. She couldn't hold this. Not forever. Not even for much longer. But she didn't need forever. She just needed enough time. Kael, she shouted without taking her eyes off the creature. Get them out! North exit from the valley! Go! I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. She poured more energy into the barrier, sealing the crack, buying seconds. I can't hold this and evacuate at the same time. Get them out! She felt him hesitate, torn between duty and something else. Then his voice rang out, commanding and absolute. Move! North Ridge! Double time! The soldiers obeyed instantly, grabbing civilians and running. Liora heard their footsteps, heard Corvin shouting orders, heard the specialists crying in fear as they fled. She didn't turn to watch. Couldn't. All her focus was on the barrier, on holding back the creature for just a little longer. 30 seconds. That's all they needed. 30 seconds to get clear. The creature hammered the barrier again and again. Each impact sent shockwaves through Liora's body, testing her limits, pushing her toward collapse. Blood dripped from her nose, her vision blurred. Her legs trembled so badly she could barely stand. 20 seconds. The creature changed tactics. Instead of hammering, it simply pressed against the barrier with both hands, applying constant crushing pressure. The energy wall began to warp, to bend inward, stressed beyond its design. Liora screamed, channeling everything she had left. The light around her became blinding, nuclear, and for a moment the barrier stabilized. 10 seconds. But she was fading. She could feel it. The connection to the system was still strong, but her human body couldn't handle this much power for this long. Her cells were burning out, her nervous system overloading. She was dying by inches, consumed by the very energy she was trying to wield. 5 seconds. The creature's eyes locked on hers through the barrier, and in them she saw recognition, understanding. It knew what she was doing, knew she was sacrificing herself, and it respected that, in its own terrible way. 0. Leora felt the last soldier clear the valley floor, sensed them reaching the relative safety of the northern ridge. They were out. They'd made it. She let the barrier drop. The creature surged forward instantly, a wave of flame and fury, and Leora dove sideways, rolling across scorched earth as fire consumed the space where she'd been standing. She came up running, pulling the last reserves of energy from the system, channeling it into her legs, her lungs, her desperate will to survive. She made it 10 yards before the creature's hand slammed down in front of her, blocking her path. Heat rolled over her like a physical force, singeing her hair, blistering her skin. She spun, looking for another route, but the creature was fast. Impossibly fast for something so massive. It moved to cut her off, hurting her back toward the center of the valley, toward the sealed entrance to the system below. Leora's mind raced. She couldn't fight this thing directly, couldn't overpower it, but maybe she didn't need to. The entrance was 30 feet away. If she could reach it, collapse it behind her, seal herself in the system while the creature was locked outside. She ran. The creature's hand came down like a meteor, missing her by inches. The impact cratered the ground, sent her sprawling. She scrambled up, kept moving, diving, and rolling as the creature tried to crush her, to burn her, to stop her desperate flight. 20 feet. 10. 5. She hit the sealed entrance at full speed, slamming her palm against the stone and timber barrier while simultaneously commanding the system to open. The mechanisms responded instantly, stone sliding aside, timber falling away. The creature's hand closed around her waist. Leora screamed as molten heat seared through her clothes, blistering flesh, the pain so intense her vision whited out. But she didn't stop channeling power, didn't stop commanding the system. Even as the creature lifted her off the ground, even as its grip tightened, crushing her ribs, she kept the connection active. And from the opened entrance, a pillar of light erupted. Pure system energy, drawn from the deepest reservoir, channeled through every mechanism at once. It shot upward like a reverse lightning strike, slamming into the creature's chest with enough force to stagger it backward. Its grip loosened. Leora dropped, hit the ground hard, and rolled through the entrance even as the creature recovered and reached for her again. She commanded the system to seal behind her, and stone flowed like water, closing the opening just as the creature's hand smashed into it from above. She lay in the darkness, gasping, her entire body one massive scream of pain. Her side where the creature had grabbed her was a ruin of burnt flesh and shattered bone. She could feel herself going into shock, her body trying to shut down to escape the agony. But she couldn't shut down. Not yet. Through her earth sense, she felt the creature above, hammering at the entrance, trying to break through. Felt it circling the valley, searching for other ways in. It wouldn't stop, wouldn't leave, not while she, the thing that had dared to oppose it, remained alive. Leora pulled herself toward the central chamber, leaving a trail of blood on the smooth stone floor. Every movement was torture. Every breath felt like drowning in broken glass. But she kept moving, crawling when she couldn't walk, dragging herself forward with pure stubborn will. She reached the central pillar and pressed her unburned hand against it. The system flooded her with healing energy immediately, trying to repair the damage. But it was too much, too severe. The creature's heat had done something to her cells, damaged them at a fundamental level that even the system's power couldn't easily fix. "Not good enough," she gasped. "Need more. Need—" The system showed her something, a deeper integration, a permanent fusion between her consciousness and its mechanisms. It would save her life, heal the damage, make her stronger than before. But it would also change her irrevocably. She wouldn't be entirely human anymore. Wouldn't be entirely the system either. Something new, something that had never existed before. A living weapon. Leora's hand trembled against the crystal. "Will I still be me?" The system's response was immediate, a feeling of absolute certainty. "You will always be you, but you will also be more." Above, the creature's assault intensified. The entire valley shook with its rage. Leora thought about the soldiers she'd saved, about Kael, who'd believed in her, About every person in the frontier who would burn if this creature wasn't stopped. She thought about the girl she'd been, forgotten, overlooked, passed over, and the woman she was choosing to become. "All right," she whispered. "Make me more." The system pulled her in, not physically. Her body remained pressed against the crystal pillar, but her consciousness expanded, spreading through the mechanisms, the channels, the vast network of power that spanned the entire valley and deeper. She could feel everything now, every stone, every root, every particle of soil, and the system flowed into her simultaneously, its knowledge, its purpose, its ancient awareness merging with her human mind, creating something new, something unprecedented. The pain vanished, not because it stopped, but because she transcended it. Existed on a level where pain was just information, easily processed and set aside. Her burnt flesh began to regenerate, but different now, stronger, infused with crystalline structures that made her skin nearly indestructible while still remaining flexible, still looking human. Her shattered ribs reformed, her damaged organs healed. Her entire cellular structure was being rebuilt, optimized, enhanced. She opened her eyes, and they glowed with blue-white light. Above, the creature was still hammering at the entrance, trying to break through. Liora could feel every impact, sense the stress it was putting on the stone, calculate exactly how long until it succeeded. 47 minutes. More than enough time. She stood, smoothly, easily, without pain, and walked to the center of the chamber, raised her hands and began to draw power, not just from the reservoir below, but from everywhere. The sunlight touching the valley, the water flowing through underground streams, the living energy of every plant, every tree, every blade of grass for miles around. The system wasn't just responding to her commands anymore. It was her. An extension of her will made manifest, and she was going to use it to end this. She worked quickly, precisely, shaping energy into configurations she'd never attempted before, but somehow knew instinctively. Creating nodes, establishing pathways, building towards something massive. 30 minutes. Above ground, she sensed movement. Kael and his soldiers had stopped their retreat at a safe distance, watching the valley, watching the creature continue its assault on the ruins where she'd disappeared. She could feel Kael's anguish, his certainty that she was dead. Not yet, she thought, not even close. 20 minutes. The energy she was gathering had reached critical mass. The entire system was thrumming with power, every channel open, every node at maximum capacity, waiting for her signal. 10 minutes. Liora took a breath, unnecessary now, more habit than need, and reached out with her awareness to the place where she'd evacuated the valley. Found Kael's mind through the earth sense, pushed a single thought toward him with enough force that he'd feel it even without their connection. Move your people back. 5 miles, now. She felt his shock, his sudden hope. Then his voice, commanding his soldiers to retreat immediately. No questions. They obeyed, running, riding, getting clear. 5 minutes. The creature finally broke through. Stone shattered as its massive fist punched through the entrance, widening the hole, tearing the barrier apart. It descended into the chamber like a god of destruction, filling the space with heat and fury and ancient, unstoppable power. It saw her standing in the center, glowing with blue-white light, and it paused. For the first time since arriving, it looked uncertain. Liora smiled. My turn. She released everything. The power erupted outward in all directions simultaneously, not as an attack, but as a transformation. The entire valley became a weapon. Stone liquefied and reshaped. Earth rose in massive walls. The crystalline veins that had been hidden underground burst through the surface, creating a cage of pure energy that surrounded the creature on all sides. It roared and lashed out, but everywhere it struck, the barriers regenerated instantly, because they weren't separate from Liora anymore. They were her. Her will made solid, her determination given form. She compressed the cage, making it smaller, tighter, forcing the creature toward the center. It fought back desperately, unleashing waves of heat that would have vaporized anything normal. But Liora's barriers weren't normal. They were fed by the entire system, by power that had been gathering for centuries, and they didn't break. The creature's eyes met hers across the shrinking space, and in them, she saw understanding, recognition of an equal, or perhaps something greater. She spoke, her voice resonating through the earth itself. You were sleeping. Someone woke you, used you, but I'm giving you a choice. Return to sleep willingly, or I'll force you. The creature's response came not in words, but in pure emotion, raw and overwhelming. Rage at being disturbed, grief at what it had been made to do. And beneath it all, exhaustion. It was ancient beyond measure, and it was tired, so very tired. Then sleep, Leora said softly. I'll make sure no one wakes you again. She shifted the cage's configuration, transforming it from a prison into a cocoon, wrapping the creature in layers of energy that soothed rather than contained, singing it to rest with the system's power, the same way you'd comfort a child after a nightmare. The creature's struggles slowed, weakened, its fire dimmed from blazing white to orange to red to barely aglow. And then it slept. Leora held it there, suspended in crystalline energy, and began to lower it down, through the chamber, through the passages, all the way to the deepest point of the system, where the reservoir pulsed with ancient strength. She sealed it there, not in a cage, but in a cradle, protected, undisturbed, allowed to dream until the world itself ended. Only then did she allow herself to collapse. She fell to her knees in the central chamber, the blue-white glow fading from her skin, her eyes, leaving her looking almost human again. Almost. But anyone who looked closely would see the subtle differences, the way her movements were too precise, the way her eyes reflected light at odd angles, the way power still hummed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. She'd saved everyone, stopped the creature, prevented the destruction of the entire frontier, but she'd also become something else, something new, something that would make people afraid when they understood what she'd done. Leora laughed, a broken, exhausted sound, and wiped blood from her nose. The girl no one chose, she whispered to the empty chamber. Look at me now. Above, she could feel soldiers approaching, Kael leading them, Corvin with them, coming to see what had happened, coming to find out if she'd survived. She had. But the question was, would they accept what she'd become? Or would saving them all make her their greatest threat? Leora pushed herself to her feet, squared her shoulders, and began walking toward the surface, toward whatever came next, because the girl who'd entered this chamber 8 days ago would have hidden, would have fled, would have made herself invisible again. But the woman leaving it, the guardian, the weapon, the bridge between human and ancient power, was done hiding. They wanted to see their catalyst? She'd show them exactly what they'd found. She emerged from the ruins into a world transformed by fire. The valley floor was scorched black, still smoking in places where the creature's passage had turned soil to glass. The air tasted like ash and ozone, and overhead the sky had turned a sickly orange from all the particulate matter suspended in the atmosphere. But the soldiers who'd fled were returning now, cautiously, weapons drawn, eyes scanning for threats. They saw her and froze. Leora understood why. She'd looked at her reflection in a pool of water in the chamber below, seen what the fusion had done to her. Her skin still looked human, but it had a faint luminescence now, barely visible in daylight, but unmistakable in shadow. Her eyes caught and reflected light like a cat's, and when she moved, it was with a precision and grace that no normal person possessed. She looked like herself, but also like something else, something more. Kael was the first to approach, his hand not on his sword but extended in front of his soldiers, holding them back. His face was difficult to read, relief and caution, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Leora, he said quietly, Are you all right? She almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. Define all right. He was close enough now that she could see his eyes scanning her face, noting the changes. The way her pupils dilated too perfectly in response to light. The way her skin didn't quite move the same way anymore. What happened down there? I stopped the creature, sealed it away where it can't hurt anyone. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. But the process changed me. The system and I were connected now, permanently. Corvin emerged from behind the line of soldiers, his armor scorched, his face pale but his eyes sharp. He stared at Leora like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The creature. Where is it? Deep underground, sleeping. It won't wake again unless someone deliberately tries to rouse it. She met his gaze directly. And I wouldn't recommend trying. The system won't let anyone access it now. Not without going through me first. Through you. Corvin's voice was flat. You mean you control it? I mean, the system and I are one. What threatens it threatens me. What I protect, it protects. Leora spread her arms slightly, showing herself fully. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Your weapon, your catalyst. Here I am. The silence that followed was broken only by the wind moving through scorched grass. Every soldier, every specialist, every person in that valley was staring at her. Some with awe, some with fear, a few with something that looked like hunger. Corvin recovered first. You saved us. All of us. The entire frontier owes you a debt. I didn't do it for debt. Then why? Leora thought about Greystone. 2,000 people burning. About the orphanage where she'd spent 18 years being told she was nothing. About every person who'd passed her over, looked through her, dismissed her existence. Because I could, she said simply. Because this power chose me, and I chose to use it for something that mattered. One of the specialists, the woman who'd argued with Corvin about compatibility, stepped forward tentatively. May I? She gestured at Leora with one of her instruments. I need to understand what happened to you. The readings I'm getting are unprecedented. Leora nodded, and the woman approached carefully, holding up her device. The needles immediately spun wildly, unable to find stable readings. The specialist's eyes went wide. You're generating a constant energy field. Low level, but pervasive. It's like you've become a living node. She looked up from her instrument, her expression mixing scientific fascination with genuine fear. You're not just bonded to the system anymore. You are the system, a human interface for power that predates civilization. Is that a problem? Leora asked quietly. The specialist hesitated. That depends on what you plan to do with it. Right now, sleep for about 3 days. Leora's exhaustion was catching up to her despite the system's sustaining energy. After that, I haven't decided yet. Corvin's jaw tightened. You can't just... Can't what? Leora's voice sharpened. Can't refuse to hand myself over to the crown? Can't decide my own fate? You seem to forget, Lord Corvin, that I'm not your subject. This land belonged to Aldrich Vance, and I'm his heir, which means I'm not under your authority. The Crown's jurisdiction supersedes. The Crown's jurisdiction ends where I decide it ends. The words came out harder than Leora intended, but she didn't soften them. I just stopped a force that destroyed 3 battalions and wiped out an entire settlement. I could have let it burn through this valley, could have let it continue west into your territory, Corvin. But I didn't. So maybe before you start throwing around legal authority, you remember who saved your life. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Several hands had drifted toward weapons, but Kael's sharp gesture stopped them. He stepped between Leora and Corvin, his voice carefully neutral. This isn't the time or place for jurisdictional debates. We have wounded to tend, reports to file, and a valley to secure. He looked at Corvin meaningfully. Perhaps we should establish a command post and assess the situation properly before making any decisions. Corvin looked ready to argue, but one of his captains cleared his throat. My lord, we need to verify that the threat is actually contained, and get the specialists examining what remains of the creature's path. If there's any chance it could wake again. It won't, Leora interrupted. Not unless you do something spectacularly stupid to provoke it. Nevertheless, the captain continued, his tone respectful but firm. We need confirmation, standard protocol. Corvin's expression suggested he wanted to refuse purely out of spite, but he was smart enough not to. Fine. To establish camp at the northern ridge, full defensive perimeter, and I want guards on this valley 24 hours a day. Guards to keep threats out? Leora asked pointedly. Or to keep me in? Both, if necessary. Kael's hand went to his sword hilt, not drawing, just resting there. A warning. That's not going to happen. Excuse me? You're not imprisoning her, Corvin. She just saved all our lives. That earns her respect, not captivity. She's bonded to a power source that could level kingdoms. That makes her too dangerous to leave unsupervised. Then I'll supervise her. Kale's voice had gone cold. As warden of the eastern frontier, it's my responsibility to manage threats in my territory, and I'm claiming jurisdiction. You can't. I just did. This valley sits 3 miles inside my patrol range, which makes it my authority. If you want to dispute that, you can take it up with the crown, but until you get a ruling, she's under my protection. The two men stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Leora watched them both, calculating. Kyle was risking his position for her, possibly his life if Corvin decided to push the issue with force. She should tell him it wasn't necessary, that she could protect herself. But the truth was, she needed an ally right now. Needed someone who understood politics and power structures better than she did. And Kale had just proven he was willing to stand between her and people who'd use her as a weapon. This isn't over, Corvin said finally, his voice tight. No, Kyle agreed, but it's finished for today. Get your people settled. I'll do the same. We'll reconvene tomorrow and discuss next steps. He turned to Leora. Can you walk? She could do more than walk, could probably run 50 miles without stopping if she needed to. But she recognized the offer for what it was, an excuse to leave before the situation escalated. Yes? Then come with me. My camp is 2 miles north. You can rest there. They walked through the scorched valley, Kyle's soldiers forming a protective perimeter around them. Leora could feel Corvin's eyes on her back, could sense his people watching, calculating. The specialist was already examining the creature's path, taking readings, documenting everything. They'd study her now, try to understand her, try to figure out how to replicate what had happened or how to control it. She'd become the most valuable and most dangerous person in the frontier in the span of a single day. The weight of that realization settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. When they were far enough from Corvin's people, Kyle spoke quietly. You didn't have to reveal yourself like that. You could have stayed hidden, let them think the creature left on its own. And let it come back? Let it destroy more settlements? Leora shook her head. I'm done hiding, Kale, done making myself invisible. If I'm going to have this power, I'm going to use it, and people are going to know. Even if it makes you a target? I've been a target my whole life, just a different kind. She looked at him directly. Why did you defend me back there? You're risking everything, your position, your authority, maybe even your life. For what? Someone you barely know? Kale was quiet for several steps. Because I've seen what happens when power gets claimed by people who only want to use it for control. I've watched the crown turn ancient systems into weapons, watched governors exploit them for political gain, and I'm tired of it. He met her eyes. You're different. You stopped that creature not because someone ordered you to, but because it was right. That's rare. That's worth protecting. Even if I'm dangerous? Especially then. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The frontier doesn't need more controlled weapons. It needs people who'll make the hard choices when it matters. They reached Kyle's camp as the sun was setting, turning the smoke-filled sky into shades of crimson and gold. His soldiers had established a proper defensive perimeter, tents arranged in military precision, watchfires already burning. Several looked up as they approached, their expressions shifting when they recognized Leora. She could see the same mix of awe and fear she'd seen in Corvin's people, could feel them reassessing her, trying to reconcile the thin girl with worn clothes with the being who'd stopped a creature that had destroyed battalions. Kyle led her to his personal tent, larger than the others but still Spartan. A cot, a table covered in maps, weapons carefully maintained and displayed. You can rest here. I'll have food brought and water for washing. Where will you sleep? I'll manage. He paused at the tent entrance. Leora, what happened down there? The fusion with the system. Do you have any idea what the long-term effects might be? She'd been avoiding thinking about that question. The specialist was right. I've become something new. I can feel the system's awareness alongside my own thoughts now. It's like having a second consciousness that's also me. And my body... She held up her hand, watching the faint luminescence beneath her skin. I'm stronger, faster. I don't get tired the same way, but I'm also different in ways I don't fully understand yet. Are you still human? I don't know. The admission hurt more than she expected. Maybe. Mostly, but there's something else there too now. Something ancient and patient and very, very powerful. Kale studied her face. Does it frighten you? Terrifies me, Leora said honestly, but not as much as the alternative. Not as much as being powerless while people burn. He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. He left, and Leora collapsed onto the cot, her body finally acknowledging the exhaustion she'd been ignoring. But sleep didn't come easily. Her mind was too active, processing everything that had happened. The fusion. The battle. The way Corvin looked at her like she was a resource to be claimed. She could feel the system humming beneath the earth, even at this distance. Could sense its awareness touching hers, checking on her, making sure she was all right. It felt almost like concern, like the power she'd bonded with actually cared about her well-being. Strange. Impossible. But undeniably real. She was drifting toward sleep when she heard voices outside. Raised. Urgent. Leora sat up, her enhanced hearing picking out words even through the tent fabric. Don't care what Ravine said. Lord Corvin wants her secured and transported to the capital for proper examination. That's not happening. One of Kyle's soldiers, voice firm. The warden gave explicit orders. The warden doesn't have authority over crown matters. Neither does Corvin until he gets official confirmation from the capital, which means until a royal decree arrives, she stays here. Footsteps approaching the tent. Multiple people. Leora stood, her hand going instinctively to her knife before she remembered she didn't need it anymore. She had something far more dangerous than steel. The tent flap opened. Not Corvin's soldiers, but the specialist woman, accompanied by 2 guards. She held up her hands immediately, showing she was unarmed. I'm not here to take you anywhere. I just need to talk. Leora relaxed slightly but didn't sit. About what? About what you are now. What the fusion did to you. The specialist stepped fully inside, her guards remaining at the entrance. My name is Sarah Thane. I've spent 20 years studying ancient systems, and I've never seen anything like what happened to you. That makes 2 of us. Sarah pulled out her instrument again, but didn't activate it. The energy signature you're generating, it's not constant. It fluctuates based on your emotional state. When you were angry back there, talking to Corvin, it spiked significantly. And when Kyle defended you, it calmed. She looked up. You're not just controlling the system anymore. You're channeling it unconsciously, which means if you lose control, I could hurt people. Leora finished the thought. I know, I can feel it, like pressure building whenever I get angry or afraid. Then you need to learn control, real control. Not just how to use the power, but how to contain it. Sarah sat down without asking permission, her expression urgent. I can help you. I've worked with other bonded individuals, nothing at your level, but the principles are the same. Mental discipline, emotional regulation, ways to compartmentalize so the power doesn't leak through during normal activities. Why would you help me? You work for the crown. I work for knowledge, Sarah corrected. The crown pays me, yes, but my loyalty is to understanding these systems, to making sure they're used responsibly. And right now, you're the most important discovery in a century. If you lose control, if you accidentally hurt people, they'll hunt you down and try to kill you. I'd rather prevent that. Leora studied her face, looking for deception, found only earnest concern. What do you want in return? Permission to study you. Not invasively, just observations, readings, documentation. And in exchange, I teach you everything I know about managing a bond with ancient power. It was a reasonable offer, almost too reasonable. And Corvin? Corvin wants you as a weapon. I want you as a colleague, someone who can help me understand what these systems were really for. Sarah's eyes were bright with genuine curiosity. You felt something when you sealed that creature, didn't you? Something beyond just power, a purpose, a reason these systems exist. Leora hesitated, then nodded. The system isn't a weapon. It was designed to protect, to preserve life, not destroy it. The people who built it, they were trying to safeguard their civilization against threats like the fire creature, against forces that would consume everything. And now you carry that purpose. Sarah leaned forward. Don't you see how important that is? Not as a weapon for the crown, as a guardian. The role the system was designed to work with. That's what I'm afraid of, Leora admitted quietly, that I won't be strong enough, smart enough, that I'll fail and people will die because I wasn't good enough. You stopped a creature that destroyed battalions. You saved 60 people today and probably thousands more who would have been in its path. You're already good enough. Sarah's voice was firm. Now you just need to learn how to maintain that, how to live with this power without it consuming you. Before Leora could respond, shouts erupted outside. Not arguments. Alarm. Kael's voice rose above the others, commanding his soldiers to positions. Leora burst out of the tent, Sarah close behind. The camp was in controlled chaos, soldiers grabbing weapons, forming defensive lines. And on the ridge to the east, silhouetted against the setting sun, an army. Not Corvin's people. These were different. Darker armor, different banners, and there were hundreds of them, spreading across the ridge like a wave. Kael saw her and ran over, his face grim. We've got a problem. That's General Mordaine's force. He governs the western provinces, and he's Corvin's primary rival. If he's here, he heard about the creature, Leora finished, and he wants the power that stopped it. Exactly. Kael's hand was on his sword. I've got maybe 30 soldiers here. Corvin has 60. Mordain has at least 300. If he decides to take you by force, we can't stop him. Leora looked at the army on the ridge, then at Kael's soldiers preparing to defend her despite impossible odds. She thought about the specialist's words, about control, about purpose, about choosing when to hide and when to stand. Then we don't fight, she said quietly. What? We don't fight. We show him why fighting would be a mistake. Leora walked past Kael's defensive lines toward the open ground between the camps. Tell your people to stand down, and send word to Corvin to do the same. What I'm about to do will either solve this problem or make it much, much worse. Leora, trust me, please. Kael stared at her for one long moment, then nodded sharply. He turned to his soldiers. Hold positions but weapons down. Let her handle this. Leora walked alone into the space between the camps. Above her, the sky was darkening to purple, and the first stars were appearing through the smoke. Behind her, she could feel Kael's people watching, Corvin's forces emerging from their camp to see what was happening. And ahead, on the ridge, General Mordaine's army waiting. She stopped in the center of the valley floor and closed her eyes, reached deep into her connection with the system, and showed them what they were really dealing with. Light erupted from the ground beneath her feet, not violent, not threatening, but undeniable. Blue-white radiance that spread in branching patterns across the scorched earth, following the paths of the crystalline veins far below. Within seconds, the entire valley was glowing, transformed into a lattice of power visible for miles. But Leora didn't stop there. She pulled more energy, carefully, precisely, and began to shape it, raising pillars of light around her in a perfect circle, creating barriers that rose 50 feet high, then 100, then 200. Not solid walls, translucent, shimmering, beautiful, and terrifying in equal measure. And then she lifted herself into the air, not with wings or flight, but with pure controlled force, hovering 20 feet above the ground at the center of her light circle. Her eyes blazed blue-white, her skin glowed. Her hair moved in a wind that existed only where she directed it. She looked like a goddess, like a force of nature made manifest. Every soldier in every camp had stopped moving, stopped breathing. They stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight before them. Leora's voice rang out, amplified by the system's energy, carrying clearly to every corner of the valley. My name is Leora Vance. I am bonded to the ancient power beneath this land. I stopped the creature that destroyed Greystone and 3 military battalions. I sealed it away where it cannot harm anyone. She turned slowly, making sure they could all see her. And I am not a weapon for anyone to claim. The silence was absolute. General Mordain, she continued, looking directly at the ridge. You came here hoping to secure a strategic advantage, to claim power that could shift the balance between provinces. But this power isn't a resource. It's not a tool. It's a responsibility I've chosen to bear. She lowered herself back to the ground but kept the light show active, kept the pillars blazing. I don't want war with the crown. I don't want conflict with governors or generals. I just want to protect people from threats like the one I stopped today. But if you try to take me, try to control me, try to use me, The pillars flared brighter, and the ground trembled. You'll find out exactly why this system waited centuries for someone compatible. Because it doesn't bond with people who can be controlled. It bonds with people who will defend it. Absolutely. She let the display fade gradually, the light dimming, the pillars lowering, until she stood alone on dark earth beneath emerging stars. "Go back to your provinces," she said quietly, but her voice still carried. "Tell the crown what you saw. Tell them the frontier has a guardian now, someone who will protect it from external threats and internal exploitation equally." She turned and walked back toward Kael's camp, her heart hammering, but her steps steady. Behind her, she heard murmurs spreading through all three camps. Shock, awe, fear, respect. She'd just declared her independence from everyone, claimed herself, proven she wasn't someone who could be bullied or controlled. It was the most terrifying thing she'd ever done, and also, somehow, the most freeing. Kael met her at the edge of his camp, his expression unreadable. "That was insane," Leora finished. "I was going to say brilliant, but insane works too." He looked back at the valley, where soldiers were still staring at the space where her display had been. "You just changed everything, made yourself into a political force whether you wanted to be or not." "I know." Leora's legs were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, but at least now they know they can't just take me, can't just claim me like property. Sarah appeared beside them, her instrument beeping frantically. "That energy expenditure, you used enough power to destroy this entire valley, but you shaped it into something beautiful instead. Controllable. Precise." She looked up at Leora with something approaching reverence. "You're not just bonded to the system, you're mastering it." "I'm surviving it," Leora corrected. "There's a difference." On the ridge, General Mordaine's army was pulling back, not retreating fully but establishing a distant perimeter. Watching. Waiting. Corvin's forces were doing the same, creating a triangle of military presence around the valley with Kael's smaller force in the middle. Nobody was attacking, nobody was claiming her. For the moment, she'd bought herself freedom. But Leora knew it wouldn't last. The crown would respond. Other governors would make moves. People with power always wanted more, and she'd just proven she had something they couldn't acquire any other way. She'd become the most valuable person in the kingdom, and the most dangerous. Kael seemed to read her thoughts. "You know they'll come for you eventually. Once the shock wears off, once they've planned and strategized, you can't fight the entire kingdom." "No," Leora agreed quietly. "But I don't have to. I just have to make fighting me more costly than working with me." She looked at him directly. "You said the frontier needs people who'll make hard choices. Well, I'm making one. I'm staying. I'm protecting this land. And anyone who wants to change that will have to go through me." Kael's expression shifted, something fierce and approving. "Then I guess you'll need allies, people who believe in protecting rather than conquering. Are you volunteering?" "I've been volunteering since the moment I sent my soldiers away and talked to you alone in that chamber." He extended his hand. "You defend the frontier from ancient threats. I'll defend it from political ones. Together, we might actually keep this place from burning." Leora looked at his offered hand, thinking about trust, about partnership, about the fact that she didn't have to do this alone anymore. She took his hand and felt the system pulse approval through their connection. "Together then," she said. And for the first time since leaving Greymarch Orphanage, Leora felt like she'd found not just power, but purpose. Not just survival, but a future worth fighting for. The girl no one chose had become the guardian everyone needed. And she was just getting started. The alliance changed everything. Over the next 3 days, Kael worked with ruthless efficiency to transform the valley from a contested battleground into a legitimate territory. He sent riders to every settlement within a week's travel, spreading word not of a weapon the crown could claim, but of a guardian who'd saved them all. He documented everything: the creature's path of destruction, the casualties prevented, Leora's intervention, building a narrative that would be harder for the crown to challenge. And Leora trained. Sarah proved invaluable, teaching her meditation techniques that helped separate her human consciousness from the system's vast awareness. How to exist in both states without losing herself. How to access the power without letting it bleed through constantly. By the second day, Leora could walk through camp without her skin glowing, could speak without her voice resonating with ancient energy. She was learning to be human when she needed to be, and something more when the situation demanded it. But the fragile peace couldn't last. On the fourth morning, a royal courier arrived. Leora felt him coming long before he reached the valley, the earth sense that was now second nature to her picking up his horse's hoofbeats miles away. She emerged from Kael's command tent as the rider crested the ridge, his mount exhausted, the royal seal visible on his saddlebags even at a distance. Kael was already beside her, his expression grim. "That's a priority messenger, crown business. For you or for me?" "Probably both." The courier dismounted in the center of camp, pulling out a sealed scroll. He looked young, barely 20, and his eyes went wide when he saw Leora standing next to Kael. He'd heard the stories then, knew what she was. "Lord Ravine," he said formally, his voice shaking slightly, "I carry a royal decree from the capital, and a summons." He looked at Leora. "For both of you." Kael took the scroll, broke the seal, and read in silence. Leora watched his jaw tighten, saw the muscle jumping in his cheek. Not good news, then. "What does it say?" she asked quietly. He handed her the scroll without speaking. The language was formal, dense with legal terminology, but the meaning was clear enough. The crown acknowledged the threat that had been stopped, acknowledged Leora's role in stopping it, and demanded her immediate presence at the capital for formal evaluation and integration into royal service. It was phrased as an honor, a recognition of her value. But the last paragraph made the reality clear. Failure to comply would be considered an act of rebellion against the crown, and would be met with appropriate force. They were giving her a choice that wasn't really a choice. Submit or be branded a traitor. Leora lowered the scroll, her hands steady despite the rage building in her chest. "When?" "You're to depart within 3 days," the courier said. "A royal escort will arrive tomorrow to ensure safe passage." "Ensure," Kael repeated flatly. "Interesting word for it." The courier flushed. "Those are my orders, my lord. I'm just the messenger." "Then your message is delivered. You can go." The courier looked relieved to leave. He remounted quickly and rode back the way he'd come, probably eager to be away from the valley and its dangerous new guardian. Leora waited until he was out of earshot before speaking. "They're not going to let this go, are they?" "No." Kael's voice was tired. "The crown sees you as too valuable to remain independent, too dangerous to leave unsupervised. They'll dress it up as honor and service, but what they really want is control. And if I refuse? They'll send an army, maybe several. They'll blockade the valley, cut off supplies, wait you out, or force you into a confrontation you can't win without killing hundreds of people." Leora closed her eyes, feeling the system's awareness touching hers, offering power, offering solutions that involved crushing anyone who threatened her. But that wasn't who she wanted to be. Wasn't why the system had chosen her. "There has to be another way," she said. "There might be." Kael's tone suggested he didn't like what he was about to propose. "You could go to the capital, not as a prisoner, but as an equal. Negotiate from a position of strength. Show them you're willing to work with the crown, but only on your terms." "That's insane. The moment I'm in the capital, surrounded by their forces, away from my power source, you'd still be connected to the system. Distance doesn't matter, does it?" Leora paused, reaching out through the bond. Kael was right. Even here, miles from the central chamber, she could feel every pulse of energy, could draw on the reservoir if needed. The fusion had made the connection permanent and distance independent. "No," she admitted, "distance doesn't matter, but being surrounded by people who want to use me, who see me as a resource, which is why you wouldn't go alone." Kael met her eyes. "I'd go with you. As warden of the eastern frontier, I have the right to attend royal councils. And as your ally, I'd make sure they understood the cost of trying to control you." "You'd risk your position for this?" "I'm already risking it. The moment I claim jurisdiction over you, I put myself in opposition to Corvin, Mordan, and probably half the royal court." A grim smile touched his face. "Might as well go all in." Sarah appeared from the specialist tent, her expression urgent. "I've been analyzing the decree. There's a clause buried in the legal language. If you demonstrate exceptional service to the realm, you can petition for autonomous status. It's rare, usually reserved for military heroes or crucial advisors, but it's there." "Exceptional service," Leora repeated. Like stopping an ancient creature from burning through the kingdom? That might qualify, but you'd need to present it correctly. Frame yourself not as someone who needs to be controlled, but as someone the crown can't afford to alienate. Sarah pulled out a document covered in notes. I've been working on a proposal, a formal agreement where you operate as an independent guardian, answerable to the crown only for threats that endanger the kingdom as a whole. In exchange, you maintain the frontier's defenses and provide warning of any ancient powers awakening. Kale studied the proposal, his expression shifting from skeptical to considering. This could work, if we present it right, if we have enough support. Support from who? Leora asked. The settlements you saved, the soldiers who witnessed what you did. Even Corvin and Mordain, they might oppose you, but they can't deny you stopped a threat they couldn't. Kale's mind was clearly racing through political calculations. We'd need testimony, documentation, proof that you're more valuable as an ally than as a controlled asset. Over the next 2 days, they built their case. Kale sent riders to every settlement within the creature's projected path, gathering written statements from survivors, testimonies from people who would have died if not for Leora's intervention. The mayor of a town called Thornhaven wrote that the creature had been heading directly for them, population 3,000, when it suddenly stopped and turned back east. Stopped because Leora had sealed it away. The military captains who'd been at the valley provided their accounts. Even Corvin, after significant pressure from his own soldiers, contributed a formal statement acknowledging Leora's role in preventing catastrophic loss of life. Sarah compiled energy readings, technical analysis, everything needed to prove that Leora's bond with the system was stable and controlled, that she wasn't a ticking time bomb, but a disciplined wielder of ancient power. And Leora herself practiced, not just combat applications, but control, precision. She could now channel enough power to shatter mountains, then dial it back to healing a bird's broken wing. Could generate barriers strong enough to stop armies, then make them permeable enough to let a gentle breeze through. She was becoming what the system needed her to be, a bridge between ancient power and human wisdom. On the morning of the third day, the royal escort arrived, but it wasn't the military force Leora had expected. Instead, a single carriage accompanied by 20 honor guards, ceremonial armor, formal banners, the kind of escort used for dignitaries, not prisoners. Someone at the capital was playing this carefully, making it look like Leora was being honored, not compelled. A woman stepped from the carriage, older, gray-haired, wearing robes that marked her as a royal counselor. Her eyes were sharp as she surveyed the camp, taking in the defensive positions, the 3 separate military forces still maintaining their wary distance, and finally, Leora herself. Miss Vance, she said formally, I am Counselor Marin, advisor to the Crown. I'm here to escort you to the capital for formal recognition of your service. Recognition, Leora repeated. Not evaluation? A hint of a smile touched Marin's lips. The decree was written by politicians trying to sound authoritative. I'm here on behalf of people who actually understand what you did, who want to thank you, not cage you. And if I refuse, then I go back and report that the frontier's new guardian prefers independence to cooperation, and the politicians I mentioned will use that to justify sending armies. Marin's expression was steady. But I'm hoping you're smarter than that, hoping you understand that real power isn't just strength, it's knowing when to negotiate and when to fight. Kyle stepped forward. She won't be going alone. Marin's eyes shifted to him. Lord Ravine, I expected you'd be involved. She pulled out another scroll. The Crown anticipated your attachment to Miss Vance. You're summoned as well to provide testimony regarding frontier security and ancient threat assessment. How convenient, Kyle said dryly. Pragmatic, Marin corrected. The Crown wants this resolved without bloodshed. You both coming willingly with proper escort and ceremony is far preferable to the alternative. She looked between them. I give you my word. No harm will come to either of you while under my protection. You'll be heard, your case will be presented, and the Crown will make a decision based on merit, not fear. Leora searched the woman's face for deception, found only tired pragmatism. Marin was probably being honest as anyone in politics could be. This was a genuine attempt at diplomacy, which meant refusing would make Leora look unreasonable, would give the crown justification for harder measures. She looked at Kael. He gave the smallest nod. Your choice, but I'll stand with you either way. Leora took a breath and made her decision. All right, we'll go to the capital. We'll make our case. But understand this, Counselor Marin. I'm not going as a subject seeking approval. I'm going as an equal seeking alliance. And if the crown can't accept that, then we're going to have problems. Marin's smile was genuine this time. Miss Vance, I think the crown is about to discover it already has problems. The interesting kind. She gestured to the carriage. Shall we? The journey to the capital took 5 days. Leora spent them learning everything she could from Marin about royal politics, about the factions at court, about who would support her and who would oppose. Kael added his own knowledge, years of navigating bureaucracy and military hierarchy. By the time the capital's walls came into view, Leora understood the battlefield she was walking into. The capital was enormous, easily 50 times the size of Greymarch, with walls that rose 100 feet high, and a palace at its center that looked like a mountain carved into deliberate grandeur. Thousands of people filled its streets, more humanity packed into one place than Leora had seen in her entire life. And they were all staring at the carriage as it passed. Word had spread. Of course it had. The girl who stopped the Eastern Fire. The guardian of the frontier. Stories had a way of growing in the telling, and by now Leora was probably being described as everything from a saint to a monster, depending on who was talking. The carriage rolled through the palace gates into a courtyard where dozens of officials waited. Lords and ladies in formal dress, military officers, royal advisors, and at the center, standing on a raised platform, the king himself. King Aldrich IV was younger than Leora expected, maybe 40, with graying hair and eyes that looked tired despite his upright posture. He wore his crown like a burden, and when he looked at Leora, she saw not hunger for power, but genuine curiosity. Miss Leora Vance, he said formally as she stepped from the carriage, welcome to the capital. We have much to discuss. The formal audience was held in the Great Hall, with what looked like half the kingdom's nobility in attendance. Leora stood before the throne with Kael beside her, feeling hundreds of eyes assessing her, looking for signs of the power she carried, trying to determine if she was dangerous or valuable or both. The king's voice rang out clearly. We are gathered to acknowledge the service of Leora Vance, who single-handedly stopped the Eastern threat that claimed thousands of lives. Her actions prevented what could have been the greatest catastrophe in our kingdom's history. He looked directly at her. The crown recognizes this service and seeks to understand what role you wish to play in the kingdom's future. It was as close to an open negotiation as she was likely to get. Leora stepped forward, her voice steady. Your Majesty, I stopped the Eastern creature not for glory or reward, but because it was necessary, because I had the power to do it, and others didn't. She paused, letting her words carry. That power comes from an ancient system bonded to the frontier. It chose me, not because I'm special, but because I understand what it means to protect rather than conquer. Murmurs rippled through the hall. She ignored them. I didn't ask for this power, didn't seek it out for political gain. But now that I have it, I intend to use it responsibly. To guard the frontier against ancient threats. To prevent catastrophes like Greystone from happening again. She met the king's eyes directly. But I won't do it as a servant of the crown. I'll do it as an independent guardian, allied with the kingdom, but not controlled by it. The murmurs became outright talking. Several nobles looked outraged. Others seemed intrigued. One lord stood, his face red with anger. This is unprecedented. You can't just declare independence from royal authority. I can if that authority has no legitimate claim over me, Leora replied calmly. I am Aldrich Vance's heir. The land I guard belonged to him, making it independent territory that he never ceded to the crown. I'm simply maintaining that status. Aldrich Vance was a madman who abandoned his claim decades ago. He was an explorer who discovered something beyond his understanding and made the hard choice to leave it dormant rather than abuse it. Leora's voice hardened. Something I suspect many in this room wouldn't have done. The king raised his hand, silencing the hall. Lord Brevin, sit down. He looked at Leora thoughtfully. You make a compelling argument about territorial rights, but the crown has a responsibility to all its subjects. How can we be certain you'll act in the kingdom's interests if you're not bound by royal authority? Because I already did, Kael interjected, stepping forward. She saved my soldiers, saved civilians from 3 different provinces, stopped a threat your armies couldn't handle, all without orders, without compensation, without any guarantee of recognition. His voice carried absolute conviction. She acted because it was right. That's a better guarantee than any oath of fealty. Sarah emerged from the crowd where she'd been standing with other specialists. Your Majesty, if I may, I've studied Miss Vance extensively over the past week. The power she wields is unprecedented, yes, but her control over it is equally remarkable. She's not a danger waiting to explode. She's a guardian who's already proven her discipline and judgment. Other voices joined in. A captain who'd been at the Valley, the mayor of Thornhaven, even, surprisingly, Corvin, his statement delivered through a proxy, acknowledging Leora's critical role despite his personal reservations. The king listened to all of it, his expression unreadable. Finally, he raised his hand again, and silence fell. Miss Vance, your case is compelling, but the crown cannot simply accept an independent power within its borders without safeguards. So I propose a compromise. He stood, his formal robes flowing. You will be recognized as guardian of the eastern frontier, an autonomous position, outside normal royal hierarchy. You'll maintain your independence, your control over the ancient system, your freedom to act as you see fit in defending the frontier. Hope flared in Leora's chest, but she could hear the condition coming. In exchange, the king continued, you will pledge to defend the kingdom against ancient threats, to provide warning of any powers awakening in your territory, and to answer the crown's call if catastrophic danger threatens the realm as a whole, not as a servant, but as an ally bound by mutual interest. He descended from the throne, approaching Leora directly. You want to be recognized as an equal? Then prove you can negotiate like one. Accept the responsibilities that come with the power you wield. Show us you understand that independence isn't freedom from obligation. It's freedom to choose which obligations matter. Leora looked at Kael. He gave the smallest nod. It's fair, probably the best offer you'll get. She looked at Sarah, who was trying very hard not to smile. Take it. This is everything we hoped for. Leora turned back to the king. I accept. On one additional condition. The king's eyebrow rose. Which is? That Lord Kael Draven be recognized as my official liaison to the crown. Someone who understands both politics and the frontier. Someone I trust to communicate between your court and my territory. A ghost of a smile touched the king's face. Done. Lord Draven will be appointed Royal Warden of Frontier Affairs, maintaining his current position while also serving as intermediary. He extended his hand. Do we have an agreement, Guardian Vance? Leora took his hand, feeling the weight of what she was accepting. The responsibility, the obligation, the burden of being exactly what she'd claimed to be. We have an agreement, Your Majesty. The hall erupted in applause, some genuine, some polite, some clearly forced. But it didn't matter, she'd done it. Negotiated her independence while securing the crown's recognition. The girl no one chose had just reshaped the kingdom's power structure. That evening, after the formal ceremonies were complete, Leora stood on a palace balcony overlooking the capital. The city lights stretched to the horizon, more people in her view than had existed in her entire world a month ago. Kael found her there, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He offered her one. Not sure if guardians of ancient power are allowed to drink, he said lightly. Pretty sure the job description didn't come with a manual. Leora took the glass but didn't drink. This is all happening so fast. A month ago I was nobody. Now I'm someone who matters, Kael finished. Someone who changed the world. I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up, make the wrong choice, fail when it matters most. You will. Kael's honesty was oddly comforting. Everyone does. The difference is when you fail, you'll have the power to fix it, and the judgment to know when to try. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city. After a while, Kael spoke again. What happens now? You've secured your independence, proven yourself to the crown. You could do anything. Leora thought about the valley, about the system pulsing beneath the earth, patient and powerful, about all the other ancient systems that might exist, dormant and waiting, about threats like the fire creature that could wake at any time. Now I do the work, she said quietly.
I learn everything I can about the system, train until I can use it in my sleep, build defenses.
Establish warning systems. Make sure what happened at Greystone never happens again. Ambitious. Someone has to be. She finally took a sip of wine, felt it burn pleasantly down her throat. The system didn't choose me because I was special. It chose me because I was willing to do whatever was necessary. That hasn't changed just because I've got a fancy title now. Kale raised his glass. To the guardian of the eastern frontier, may she terrify her enemies and protect her people in equal measure. Leora clinked her glass against his. I'll drink to that. 3 months later, Leora stood in the central chamber of the system, no longer an intruder, but its rightful guardian. She'd made changes, opened select passages to Sarah and other trusted specialists who were helping document everything. Established living quarters in the upper chambers. Created a training ground where she could practice without anyone watching. But mostly, she'd just been present, learning, growing, becoming the bridge the system needed. Word had spread across the kingdom and beyond. Other frontier territories were reporting strange energy signatures, potential ancient systems waking after centuries of dormancy, and they were asking for her help, her expertise, her presence. The girl who'd been passed over at every choosing day was now the most sought-after person in the realm. Kyle visited regularly, splitting his time between his duties at court and helping Leora establish the frontier's defenses. They'd developed a rhythm, professional partnership built on mutual respect and trust, something that might become more given time, but neither was rushing. Sarah had taken up permanent residence in a chamber she'd converted to a laboratory, documenting everything about the system and Leora's bond with it. Her findings were revolutionizing how the kingdom understood ancient technology, and Leora herself had changed. Not just physically, though the fusion had made her stronger, faster, nearly ageless, but fundamentally, she moved through the world with quiet confidence now, spoke with authority that came from knowing her worth, made decisions without second-guessing herself constantly. She was still learning, still making mistakes, still terrified sometimes of the responsibility she carried, but she was also exactly where she was meant to be. One evening, as she was meditating in the central chamber, the system showed her something new. A vision. Not of threats, but of possibilities. Other guardians who might exist, bonded to other systems across the world. A network of protection that could span continents. A legacy that could outlast kingdoms. And at the center of it, a thin girl with mud-brown hair who'd walked 3 weeks into the wilderness chasing nothing but hope and a maybe. Who'd been chosen when everyone else had passed her over. Who'd become the foundation upon which something greater could be built. Leora opened her eyes, letting the vision fade, and smiled. All right, she said to the patient, ancient awareness that shared her consciousness. Let's see what else we can do. The system pulsed agreement, and together they began planning for a future where forgotten people could become guardians, where power served protection rather than conquest, where a girl who'd been nothing could prove that everyone had the potential to be everything. The story that had begun with an orphan claiming cursed land had transformed into something far greater, a new chapter in the kingdom's history, a new understanding of what power could mean, a new guardian watching over the frontier, making sure that those who came after her would never have to face ancient threats alone. Leora Vance had been the girl no one chose, but she'd become the woman who chose herself, and that had made all the difference. Above ground, in the valley where it had all begun, new construction was taking shape. Not a fortress or a palace, but something simpler, a sanctuary, a place where people who needed refuge could find it, where those with potential could be tested for compatibility with ancient systems, where the forgotten and overlooked could discover they were meant for something greater. Kyle had suggested the name, Vance Haven. A place named for the man who'd discovered the system and the woman who'd mastered it. Leora had approved it with one change, Haven for the chosen. Because everyone who came there would be chosen, not by society or circumstance or random chance, but by their own courage, their own determination, their own refusal to accept that being overlooked meant being worthless, just like she had been. The sun set over the frontier, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. And deep beneath the earth, ancient power pulsed in rhythm with a human heart, two forces merged into something unprecedented, something beautiful, something that would endure long after the current age had passed into legend. The girl no one chose had saved them all. And in doing so, she'd proven that the most powerful force in the world wasn't ancient systems or royal authority or military might. It was the courage to claim yourself when everyone else had dismissed you, to stand up when you'd been pushed down, to choose to matter when the world had decided you didn't. Lyora Vance stood beside the throne now, not behind it. An equal, a guardian, a force that had changed the kingdom forever. And somewhere in the orphanage where she'd spent 18 years being invisible, a thin girl with too many questions and not enough answers was probably standing in another choosing line, wondering if anyone would ever see her. Lyora made a mental note to send word there, to let them know that being passed over wasn't an ending. Sometimes it was just the beginning of something extraordinary. Because the world didn't need more people who did what they were told. It needed more people who did what was right. And Lyora Vance, orphan, heir, guardian, and bridge between human and ancient power, intended to make sure that lesson was never forgotten.